From the HBA podcast studio in New York City, welcome to The Medium Rules. I'm Alan Baldachin. I'm delighted to be joined today in the HBA podcast studio by Christiane Lemieux. Christiane is probably best known as the founder and CEO of the extremely popular home furnishings lifestyle brand Dwell Studios, sold to Wayfair in 2013. Christiane's new startup is The Inside, a direct-to-consumer home furnishings brand focused on customizable, affordable furniture with a high design, contemporary aesthetic. Christiane is also the founder and CEO of the digital textile printing company Cloth & Co. She is an author and has been a judge on Ellen's Design Challenge on HGTV. Let me try and say that. Putting it all together, in a 20-plus year career as a design entrepreneur, Christiane has pretty much done it all. Christiane, thanks very much for being on The Medium Rules, and looking forward to a great conversation.
Yeah.
So what did I leave out in your bio? You're also a philanthropist. You're working on a new book. What else do you have going on?
I mean, I think you've got it all there. Author,
I captured it? Okay.
Author, designer, entrepreneur. That's pretty much sums it up.
And you're an active philanthropist.
I'm an active
you're
philanthropist,
involved in,
yes. I'm on the board of a nonprofit called Every Mother Counts, which takes up quite a bit of my time. We travel around the world, and it's maternal and child advocacy. So 98% of maternal deaths are preventable. And it's the pretty easy, way to really impact in a grassroots ways mothers and families all over the world.
Okay.
And for me, a lot of the places that we're active are places that I have manufactured historically. So it's kind of closing the karmic loop. I feel like I'm giving back to places that have given a tremendous amount to me.
Not to mention, I'm sure what you bring to the table there in terms of your background and experience of management, entrepreneurship, development, would be, pretty appreciated by that organization.
It's a privilege to do it.
That's amazing. Okay, well, let's just a little bit of bio, sort of stepping back. You're from Ottawa.
I'm from Ottawa,
Ontario, where I spent a freezing cold year in 1994.
Still freezing cold.
It's about the coldest place ever.
I'm told it's the coldest capital in the world.
I've heard that too, and in fact, when I was living there in January 94, my car did not start the entire month. It was that cold, which I'm sure is, and it was plugged into a block heater the entire time. Yeah.
Yes.
You can exactly. So, and then you were at Queens, where I was as well.
Yes. Yep.
And you did art history there.
I did art history. Yeah.
And that sort of informed your aesthetic. How?
Well, I wanted to go directly to design school, but I had very academic parents who told me that I had to get an undergraduate degree, a BA of some variety, as quote unquote, something to fall back on. Which I don't know that an art history degree is something to fall back on.
It's not a law degree, exactly.
All right.
But yeah, you'll take it.
Yeah, exactly. But I'll take it. No, and I think that they weren't wrong about the fundamentals about learning how to write and learning how to research and learning how to put your thoughts together in a coherent way. I mean, it did teach me a lot, and I also think that the undergrad experience is very fun. So there's that aspect to it too. So, and a design, I went from there to Parsons, which was way more rigorous and a 24/7 kind of immersion into design. I don't know, looking back, I don't know that I would have been ready for that right out of high school. So I think it was probably the right decision.
Did the art history degree kind of deepen your critical faculty when it comes to design? For
sure. Yeah, because the historical part of it, art history is everything from design history to political science. It's all wrapped up into a visual interpretation of history. So it was very helpful from that perspective.
And then you found yourself at Portico.
So after I graduated from Parsons, this is another Canadian story.
Yeah.
A very good Canadian friend of mine Miranda Abrams had married Douglas Abrams, who was a venture capitalist, and he had bought this furniture company called Portico, and essentially was like, what do I do with it? I want to start creating product, and I didn't know what I was doing, but I realized that I could take the sort of fashion slant and bring it into home, and so I was there for less than a year. Because the product started to resonate, and I thought to myself, wow, there's an opportunity for me to do this by myself. And so I left Portico and I started Dwell Studio.
So at Portico, what were you doing there? Were you designing the pieces?
Designing and I think the critical piece for me was I was sourcing. So
Okay.
Douglas put me on a plane to Asia, and I started. This was pretty early. This is in 1999. So pretty early on, and
Yeah.
I met with all the factories, and I realized there was a lot of potential. And we're talking, it's close to 20 years next year. So not a lot of people were in market doing this at that point. And so the ability to take what we were designing at Portico and have it manufactured in Asia and get the kind of margins that Douglas wanted was really interesting. And so it was a relationship thing. I mean, once I had the relationships and they saw the quality of design, a lot of these guys and girls were willing to take a chance on working with me.
So Portico, it's an interesting, for me, kind of a landmark brand in a way. I mean, it really was a destination home store.
It was the first home concept store.
And when you say home concept store, what do you mean?
I mean, multi-brand, point of view, curated. There wasn't a lot of that. And that's become sort of ubiquitous now. But there wasn't a lot of that in 1999, 2000.
So I'm sort of thinking back. I guess that's right. I mean, if you were going to buy furniture in the 90s, putting aside Portico, you were doing what? You were going to Ethan Allen, you were going to Bloomingdale's, you were going to these mass furniture warehouse stores.
Yeah, I think that's
you
right.
weren't going to a boutique. So that was a pretty interesting insight. And Doug started that, or how did that?
He bought it from somebody else.
But then sort of turned the dial.
Turn the dial, then opened up other stores, and did all kinds of pretty interesting things.
Yeah.
But it was cross category, which I think was unusual. Like, I think you went to buy furniture at a furniture store, but you couldn't walk into a concept store like that and buy furniture and textiles and a candle and a soap and all those things.
And a book.
And a book
about design and furniture and something aspirational.
And I think it paved the way for a lot of this kind of quote unquote lifestyle around home.
Well, I mean, let's put it this way. It's hard to imagine, let's say, even West Elm without Portico.
Yeah.
And I, anecdotally, I remember, in the 90s, if I would ever go down to Soho, I would always find myself stopping into that Portico store they had.
Yep.
And just hanging out.
I think
just felt good.
I think that's right. And I think that's what the behavior was. And I think that the insight there for me was that if you couldn't afford, the $12,000 mohair sofa, you could still walk away with a really great soap that was exclusive to the store and feel like you had experienced
you participated.
Part of that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so then that led to Dwell Studios, which, by way of my introduction to Dwell, whenever I've mentioned to people today, this week, this month that we're sitting down to tape this podcast, the reaction to Dwell Studios is still extremely immediate, iconic. Like, people remember the patterns. People remember the textiles.
Yep.
You really moved the needle there in terms of design. Let's talk about Dwell. How did that get started? Tell me a little bit about that story. And
so I think it's like all of it is fairly organic, but it's just I was designing textiles for Portico, and I put them on the floor, and they really resonated. And so when I realized there was product market fit there, for me, it was about me doing it myself on my own terms. And so I left Portico to start Dwell Studio, out of my apartment by myself, and at that point, there was no, venture capital or private equity or all these things. This is really a post. I mean, in a lot of ways, that just wasn't accessible.
Certainly
to a
not for the home category,
no,
right? I mean, there were venture-backed companies, but they were tech companies.
Yeah, and not for a kid who just graduated from Parsons School of Design. Right. I mean, no one was going to write me $1 million check. And I think largely the sort of that kind of entrepreneurial climate it was about to happen, but hadn't quite happened. So, and I think a pretty interesting start, and then 2008 happened. But I think it's all post the economic crisis that really became institutionalized in the way that it is today. So
Was Dwell Studio, did it ever get venture funding? Did you bootstrap it?
I bootstrapped it.
Okay.
So I bootstrapped it. So how we did it was, I was designing, but then I started to do private label. So my first client was Crate and Barrel.
Okay.
And so did Crate and Barrel, then did Walmart.com, then did Room and Board. So designing product for all these other companies under their name, white label. Then my biggest customer was Loblaws. So in the first year, that was my first $1 million PO, was doing product development and actually shipping to Canadian stores.
But was Loblaws doing home? Loblaws, by
Yes.
the way, for people who don't know, I know of it as the biggest sort of supermarket grocery brand
In Canada. Yeah.
But it was doing home back in the 90s?
It was.
Okay.
It was under Joseph Mimran, who did Joe Fresh.
Joe Fresh. Sure.
So Joe was running their design and development.
And he's a Club Monaco guy, really.
He's the Club Monaco guy.
Yeah.
He bought Club Monaco from Alfred Sung. Yes.
Right.
And so knew a lot about product development, and so I started to work with Loblaws, and we started to ship in product.
So
and
interesting.
I was using my my vendor base in Asia that I had met. This is all in the period, like literally in a 12-month period too. That's how quickly it happened. But that really was, that ended up being our venture capital arm.
Meaning that cash flow was able to allow you to grow, scale,
Yep.
do different things.
Yep.
Basically create your own label and your own.
It was my internal venture capital.
What we're looking back on Dwell, I mean, the recession happened. You guys kind of made it through that.
We made it through. Well, I mean, we were hit with September 11th.
Yeah.
Out of the gate.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And then day one. And then, so our inflection points were, when we launched the baby and kids line, which was really when the light bulb went off. And so that was in 2004. And then by 2007, Dwell Studio, we did a secondary brand, Dwell Studio, for Target. And I think that's largely how we made it through the recession, because we were in Target between 7 and 11.
Okay.
And then we left Target, went up market, opened the store in Worcester, and that is sort of when the business model became apparent to me. I was either going to have to raise a tremendous amount of capital, roll out stores, catalogs, do all that, or think about a different way. And at that point, having been in the business for 10 years, and understanding inventory and cash flow and, design cycles, it really became apparent to me that all of this was going to go online at some point in the very near future. We were online a little bit with Dwell Studio, but it wasn't a significant part of our business.
And you're seeing this around 2011, 12. You're starting to see this beginnings of what we now think about as direct-to-consumer. Obviously, Amazon taking over.
Yep.
What were some of those bubbling signs to you? Like, what were some canary in the coal mine there of that this was coming down the pike, and
There were so many. I mean, just because just the proliferation of inspiration and media online, and seeing how that ecosystem was starting to coalesce, and understanding that, and I sat down with Ben from Pinterest when he was launching it, and he was talking about building community, and I realized all of this was going to happen online. And it was, and the business that I had built, as much as I loved it, was not going to be the business of the future, if that makes sense.
Did you at that time think about basically devoting more of the resources of Dwell to being an online company, or was that just too big a pivot to kind of contemplate?
It wasn't that. The problem was twofold though, too, because once you get into furniture, there's two things. It also becomes a logistics company. So not only was the sort of mind share moving online, but also as we got into these larger categories, a lot of it became around logistics. And so I had to ask myself, do you want to run a logistics company? Which is essentially, I think, at scale, what some of these online platforms are, right? That especially they're selling furniture.
Yeah.
You are effectively running a logistics company. And the shipping,
with a very, very designy front end and a media business on the side.
Yeah, on the side. But the thing is a lot of them, that's the holy grail. So if you can ship efficiently, that's where you get a ton of the margin. And if you can't, that's where you'll just bleed out.
Get crushed. Okay.
Yeah. And so to me, it was like, I don't want to run I'm not only do I not want to run a logistics business, like I'm just not equipped to do this.
Yeah.
Like, do I want to spend my time, my valuable time negotiating shipping rates
and custom compliance
and then like last mile experience and like everything that's around that. I mean, I spent a lot of time with Doug Mack, and some of the last mile horror stories, are
One Kings Lane.
Yeah,
Doug
One
Mack,
Kings Lane. Yeah, are some of those last mile horror stories were enough to like. It's just not what I do. I think as an entrepreneur, you have to understand what you can do well and what you can't do well.
Well, what's interesting, and this is a good segue into the next part of your journey, which is Wayfair.
Yep.
But One Kings Lane and I think Wayfair were flying high and really troughed.
Yep.
And have really now come back. Really,
Yep.
both those companies.
They both have.
And it may be the case. I mean, I'd be interested in your point of view, particularly vis-a-vis Wayfair, which. Well, let me step back and say Dwell ultimately sold to Wayfair.
So Dwell
in 2013, as I said in the intro.
Yes. And largely because I still believe they have the best back end in this business, and they understand. Neeraj understands. I mean, not only is he like he's a phenomenal CEO, but he also understands the logistics piece of this in an incredibly deep way. And I think he understands how to move product to people. And that's a huge part of this business, because I would say this to my team all the time. Like, you can design the most beautiful dining table in the world. Dining tables are especially hard to move around. And if you can't get it into somebody's house without it being dinged up or scratched, there's no point in doing it. Yeah. There's just no point.
So how did let's say the Wayfairs and the One Kings Lanes and these home brands make the transition to being sort of digitally native and online and quicker turnaround times? Like, what was that trough and recovery like, let's say at Wayfair, where you joined as EVP or
Executive Creative Director?
Executive Creative Director. So you really would have seen, I think, that transition and that kind of adjustment that they made to become so successful as they are now.
Well,
how did they hack that? So
both of them were digitally native, which is I think really important. So
to begin online, with, I guess.
Correct.
Correct.
I mean,
correct.
So I would call that e-commerce 1.0, right? Right. Because they were both there in the beginning, digitally native brands. So working from that base, but I also think they had to live through like mass shift online. And when that mass shift online happened, I mean, Wayfair and One Kings Lane proved to us that consumers were willing to buy a product that the industry said they would never buy online. Yeah. So it's just it was like massive mind share and like shifting into the digital. Because if you think about the customer journey, especially now, if I am going to decorate my kid's bedroom, I will largely start with a Google search. Right, and I'll look at images. I'll go on to different media sites and get inspiration there. And transactionally, if I find the thing that I want, I'm going to buy it online largely. And I mean, even in 2012, and that's not even that long ago. Like 5 years ago.
Yeah, no, I agree.
That wasn't necessarily the case, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why they're primed for such huge success. Is that they were there. Yeah. And they waded through this huge transition, and now people are willing to buy every single category online. In fact, if they behave like I behave, like if that's my assumption, like I never want to walk into another store. That's not how I want to spend my time. And if I can browse online after hours when I don't spend my weekends browsing in stores, if I can do it between 9 and 11 at night from my home, I'm much more willing to do that. I'm much more willing to transact that way.
Yeah. I still like the retail experience. It's just totally for a different purpose in many ways.
Right.
It's more experiential. It's almost serving. And it's an entertainment. Yes. It's almost like what the media piece is doing for the brand is the retail experiential is sort of a cousin to that.
So, but you have to be very thoughtful about how you structure your retail, right? Because a lot of the old store models, like the big, huge department store where you're bombarded with an uncurated assortment of product, is kind of the commiserate to some sort of badly merchandised platform scenario online.
Yeah.
So it has to be everything. If it's going to entertain you, it has to be really well executed.
Yes, yes. Well, we'll come back to that because I think that's relevant for what we'll talk about vis-a-vis the inside. So let's talk about the inside a little bit. Well, let me back up and let me ask you vis-a-vis Wayfair. So you left in 2017.
I left in 2016. Yep.
Why did you decide to leave? Was it a burning desire to, I don't want to overcharacterize it, but did you want to sort of have another startup you wanted to do, or you just wanted a break?
No, I had a whole bunch of startup ideas. I mean, I learned a tremendous amount while I was there. It was really a huge immersion in e-commerce. And so, with Dwell Studio, part of it was design, part of it was retail, part of it was digital, part of it was catalog, like direct mail. It was all these little things. I mean, being at Wayfair with probably best in class people from their CMO to the entire team. I mean, talk about great hiring. I just learned so much that I realized that there were ways I could take what I did, utilize what I learned there, and come up with a different model.
Okay. And you'd done it before.
And I'd done it before.
So you had the confidence and you knew you had the wherewithal. Okay. And
I'm also like, at the end of the day, I'm very, very curious and I'm a problem solver. So if there's ways to radically change things, like I'd like to, I'll execute.
Which is sort of a cross to bear.
Yeah.
So as a glutton for punishment, you decided to do another startup.
I know, which is insane.
Tell me about partnering with Forerunner.
Yes.
Getting started. What that pitch looked like. So you're now, it's 2016. You're back to the drawing board.
Oh, so I spend about a year and a half after I left, kind of setting up the supply chain, which I would have needed to execute this business. Which is an inventory-less business.
Yeah.
So, talking to my old vendors and some of the people that I work with, finding new ones. We're constantly finding new ones. We're constantly refining this supply chain.
So doing research before you launched the startup, before you got funded?
Putting all the back end,
okay.
All the back end together before.
And was that in your mind, let me make sure I can figure this out?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I'm not taking money unless I can figure it out. No.
So what did you put together?
Canadians don't recklessly take money. That's the other thing. They just don't.
Yeah.
So I put together the supply chain.
And maybe break that down for me. I think that's sort of pretty interesting. You what did you connect there?
I mean, so I realized that technology and manufacturing had gotten to a place where I could utilize all of these interesting things like 3D modeling technology, digital printing, 3D printing, like all of these things. And so I was carefully setting up a supply chain that utilized all of those things.
Were you doing deals at the time, let's say, incorporating the inside ink?
Yeah,
or were you? So you were actually going out and saying, "I'm doing this. You're going to be my. What are our terms?
Yeah,
what is this?
Will you hold hands with me and all this? Yes.
Yeah.
So doing and just making sure that I wasn't getting ahead of myself.
Because you had a very specific idea of what you wanted to do, and you wanted to make sure you could do it.
Mm-hmm.
Which was what? What was that key insight that you were trying to kind of kick the tires on?
Which I think is like essentially virtually manufacturing.
What do you mean by that?
So I mean, coming up with the design, using 3D modeling to create whatever it is, and being able to output it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Outputting it meaning
manufacturing.
And that manufacturing is done where? Is it done in the US?
And now we have several. We have probably 5 key manufacturing partners.
Okay. And they're not owned by you guys, obviously. These are just okay.
Yeah. These are third-party manufacturers.
So you were doing a lot of road work at the time.
Yeah.
You were running around, sort of meeting with manufacturers, meeting with designers, meeting with 3D. Who does your 3D stuff for you?
So we have a team in Eastern Europe.
Oh, wow.
Because it's also, that's like one of those things it's equal parts art and science, and I needed to find the people that could execute on the art part.
Where in Eastern Europe, and how did you find them?
Or
is that a trade secret?
Secret sauce.
Okay, I take it back. Don't worry, no one will listen to this. You're like, great.
Yeah, it's all secret sauce.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's
fair enough.
Very hard to replicate, very proprietary.
Okay. All right.
We're building all kinds of software to automate some of the things that we're doing. So You know, it's funny. I said this to Duff when we first started this. This time around, I'm not building a home company. I'm building a technology company that happens to make home product. But that's the secret. That's the whole secret to digitally native companies. What they're doing is they're making some of these more cumbersome analog businesses frictionless online.
Yeah.
And that's really, that's largely driven by building the right technology.
But you still are a home business front end design.
Yes,
first. Kind of in your bones, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you in other words,
in order
somebody didn't have a feel for home category.
It would be very difficult.
Business.
And also, in order to, because if you didn't have a feel for a home category and you were like moving home product, I would be competing directly with Amazon or Wayfair or Overstock. And at that point,
that's a losing proposition.
That's a horrible losing proposition.
That's for sure.
Because there isn't enough, there isn't enough room in the market for 10 of those. And
you can't outdata those guys either.
You
can't out-target them.
I can't out-logistics them. I can't out-customer acquire them.
Exactly.
I can't do. But what I can do is I can out-design them.
Yes, exactly. And you can out-instinct them.
I can out-instinct them, and I can out-beautify them.
Yes.
10 all the time.
That to me is that's incredible insight. I mean that's and so speaking of the inside, now that's your pitch.
Interior design.
Yeah.
It's not interior, give me a great chair that is in a warehouse.
It's not interior, here are a few lines of code either.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's not.
So that's your pitch. Your pitch is for the inside is
so it's funny.
Customizable.
So I was going to say how I ended up at Forerunner is that a good friend of mine from Queens worked at Soros on the technology.
Who's that?
His name is Andrew Wang. Andy Wang.
Okay.
Anyway, and he said to me, "Do you know Kirsten Green?" I said, "No." He said, "You've got to meet her." So I went out to San Francisco, and I wasn't even going to raise money at that point. And I mean, she's incredible. So
she
I sat with her. I was like,
made her mark. That's for sure in direct to consumer.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
Her instincts are flawless.
And so you were incubated there. You're part of their studio.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yep.
What was that experience like? What did that involve?
I mean,
was that a good experience? It sounds like it was.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, her whole team is incredible, and their instinct for direct to consumer is spot on.
And so did you kind of, if you will, second there for X number of months? What was that sort of?
No, I never left New York.
You know,
so
okay.
it was a lot of direct feedback. A lot of. I mean, she's helpful all the way down to like a micro level. Like she really understands UX and what the customer journey is online and how transactionally to get somewhere. I mean, I'm still whatever, a year into it, synthesizing how much information that woman has. She's amazing.
And did they just from a deal perspective, did they give you
see the seed,
resources?
The pre-seed, yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. And I think that's one of the things I didn't understand.
So are they common on the cap table, if I can ask? And if that's so they're in effect like a co-founder. That's their studio model. It's a fairly.
She is in effect like a co-founder.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Because that's been a very successful. I mean, statistically, studioed startups do better. So clearly, that immersion, that incentive, that alignment
it's also
is
not
working.
Only that, then you're part of an ecosystem where there's a whole bunch of other founders who have done some of the things that you've done. I mean, even down to as granular as like, what should we do for healthcare for our employees? Because a company is equal parts the sort of internal workings and the kind of culture you put together, the people you hire, the values you have. I mean, that's just as important as the product output. And so being part of a thought leadership is what I think she's sort of responsible for.
Yeah.
And having the rest of the Forerunner portfolio, and now Lair, who's amazing too. So having some of these, being part of these ecosystems, you have access to all the other founders that are in e-commerce, digitally native brands now.
Yeah. It's amazing the extent to which so much of the success of any business, but certainly in early stage, even in this business, even in our law firm business, is keeping balls in the air so that everyone has what they need to have, whether it be healthcare, whether it be, just every logistic detail, sort of like keeping a household in the air.
Yeah.
Like somebody's got to think about getting groceries. Somebody's got to have dinner ready. Somebody's got to, have the kid. And those elements sort of can sink a company if you don't have the right
absolutely
team.
And also
so to have that,
you have to be thinking about that. I mean, about to be in New York in the same way as in San Francisco, because there's a talent shortage.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the biggest problem now. And the talent's going to be eaten up by the companies like Facebook and Google, who have incredible benefits, who are feeding their employees all day long. I mean, the stories around at Airbnb are legendary, like full hot lunches every day just in order to keep the talent. So you have to really think about, and I don't think that's necessarily the case even 5 years ago.
Yeah.
It's just that, and especially engineers and things like that. So like our whole engineering our team is offshore, because I can't pay the same thing. And especially now that Amazon's coming into town, I can't pay what Amazon pays for their employees. Although I did poach a very good employee from Amazon.
Oh, nice. Nicely done. Yeah, kudos.
And I told them I'm going to take all my employees from their employees.
Yeah, I just think, when I think about the successful startup CEO, it's sort of like, to me, and I use this analogy, it's like an NFL quarterback. It's a very rare mix of skills and talents. You've got to have the creativity, you've got to have the leadership skills, you've got to have the drive, and you've got to be organized to keep the trains running on time.
Yep. But
and not one of those can fall down.
You also have to hire into your weaknesses very fast.
Which is much easier said than done.
Much easier said than done.
Much easier said than done to recognize those weaknesses, to find the right people, to have the right people be motivated, happy, not have stuff go on in their lives that sinks the ship.
Right.
So that they start not showing up.
Yeah,
it's very tough.
My 2.0 takeaway is that the first time around, I tried to do everything. Largely because it was such a scrappy startup. The second time around, I'm trying to get people that are much smarter than me into my business as quickly as possible. And
you're much more established, and you've got somewhat of a, so to speak, unfair advantage given all you've accomplished. So you generally would expect.
I don't think it matters anymore, because I think that the playing field gets leveled so often now that
your game's up here, but your game has to be up here. That's table stakes.
It has to be. You just have to keep going, because everything, the way people market gets, the businesses that are very successful, the digitally native businesses that just predate ours by 5 years, their customer acquisition costs weren't the same, because they got to use Google and Facebook and a bunch of different platforms in a completely different way that we do.
That's totally changed.
That's not an option for us. It's too expensive.
Yeah.
So we have to be very crafty. So you can't even hand the playbook off, because it gets rewritten for you almost on a yearly, even monthly basis.
So talk about the inside a little bit more in terms of, a couple of things. How would you identify your customer and sort of your one of the things I think that's interesting about the inside that you've talked about is how you are, and I think it's pretty disruptive, is sort of blurring the lines or taking advantage maybe of capitalizing on and pushing forward the blurred lines between trade and consumer.
Yep.
That's one, I think, key element about the inside. So what does that mean to you when I say that? What is that? What's your insight there, I guess?
I think my insight is the following, that I think largely the trade is changing very quickly because consumers have so much access to information. So it used to be trade secrets, trade vendors, and that's all going away. So at the end of the day, I think that the trade is looking for a frictionless experience to get product to their consumer. But the consumer, it's not like you can, buy something from Baker and that your consumer's not going to know how much it costs. Like it used to be, there was a whole secret mystery around trade, and the problem with the availability of information is that mystery is gone. And so I think the trade, who is a huge part of what I want to do is service her first. How can I make her or his job easier? And how can I help them transition into this new world where the value that they bring is in their design and less in their secret sources.
In their secrets, exactly.
Yeah, and so I think largely they're going to become much more like professional services. So paid by the hour. They're going to take advantage of their discount. the problem is the consumer now knows they have a discount, so they want that to be reflected in what they see on the statement. They don't want, this nebulous money to go somewhere else. And so customers also access to the trade. I mean, everybody wants their house to be Pinterest worthy now, whether you have a $10 million budget or a $10,000 budget. So there's a lot more market for the trade too. And so allowing them to expand, and then as a result, there's a lot more trade, because Americans are wanting interior design services. They want their homes to be beautiful. They spent 10 years watching HGTV. They spent 5 years...
Instagram.
Yeah, Instagram. They spent 5 years pinning their favorite product. And I think it's just wide open now. So really, really thinking about that.
So in comes the inside to say, you're sort of fusing trade and consumer.
Yeah, I'm going to digitize the trade experience. And allow designers across the country to have access to design center experience, but digitally.
And is the key to that hack, so to speak, that fusion, that disruption from your perspective, the customization? Is it the what are the elements of that?
I think a lot of it is the customization.
Okay.
I think a lot of it is bringing designer, really expensive looks to a supply chain that is much less expensive. It's also, we're drop shipping, so we get rid of the whole white glove thing. I mean, I don't know that that's going to be forever, but for right now, it's a big part of our business. So if you're moving into your apartment in New York, you don't have to schedule. Nobody wants to sit around waiting for their sofa to be. It gets delivered to your doorman or to your door, and there's minimal assembly, and you have something that's really, that is personalized to you, that has fabrics on it that you would find in a design center, and at a price point that you would find, at a mid-level or lower retail store.
Mm-hmm. How are you guys handling, let's say, returns, damaged goods, given the customization? What's that look like?
So we largely, they're quite small, and we take them back.
You just take them back, and that's the answer.
And we donate them. So there's a philanthropy part of this business too.
How is that sort of tracking? Is it about what you expected?
It's
is
about
it
what
more
we expected.
Okay.
There's industry standards, and it's
sort of tracking that sort of whatever the standard is. Okay. The other I think aspect of the inside, which is certainly a characteristic of direct to consumer, is the emphasis on doing media.
Yes.
And I thought you said something that was really interesting in something I listened to. It was a podcast or a YouTube video, and you were talking about how you really can't, how media allows your customers to feel like they're part of the brand and that they participate in the brand. What kind of media are you guys doing, and how do you see that going forward?
We're trying everything. So we have a magazine which we write for and publish content. We are starting to syndicate some of that content.
Okay.
We do Instagram, Pinterest, Facebook. Sort of everything. Because you have to meet the customer where he or she is. And sometimes that's, right there on Instagram, and sometimes it's not. And so sometimes, we're in the house forum mix, and we're playing with Reddit right now. With everything, because there's a lot of customers for this product in this country. It's huge. And we've got to just find them where they are. And so much of the interior design experience is educational, right? So if you want life hacks, and you don't want to hire somebody from Home Polish or Havenly or one of these design platforms, and you want to figure it out yourself. The behavior is, you can go into these forums, whether it's on Houzz or on Reddit or wherever else, and you can start asking questions, and those questions will get answered. And so if we can educate people and answer their questions and then provide them with product, then we can help them create the spaces of their dreams.
Are you guys doing any influencer marketing? Have you started any of that?
We're testing it.
Okay. What's your take on influencer marketing?
I think it works really well in certain categories. This is a different category, because it's one thing to get a lipstick and try it on, or, you know, this is not really an unboxing kind of situation, nor is it something that's as disposable as a lipstick. Like, if we're going to send an influencer a sofa, we want to make sure that that's what they want. So it's a slightly different proposition.
Got it.
And also, even if they have a headboard of ours, like, they want to make sure everything's styled really beautifully before they take a picture and give us UGC. So it's like a different thing. It's a much more considered purchase. Like, I think you can do, our influencer strategy is more around collaborating with people and producing product with their designs.
So this is really your collaborator kind of
yes.
take on kind of
yes.
on partnering. You guys have designers.
We're not asking them to wrap our product. We're asking them to create their own.
Which is to create their own designs and their own pieces.
Yeah. And then to speak authentically to their communities, because I think it's all about authenticity.
Sure.
When I look at some of my favorite influencers who now do nothing but sell their feeds, I'm less inclined to be influenced by them. So I think it's like a tricky thing.
Yeah. We actually we taped, I think, a pretty interesting podcast about that, and really about influencer marketing. And, you know, really the theme is authenticity. You can't have people stepping out of who they are. It just won't be interesting.
It won't.
Yeah, it won't get any traction.
You know, when some of my favorite home personalities start to sell fridges or vacuum cleaners, it becomes much less, you know,
yeah.
You can kill your brand very quickly.
Yeah, you can sort of see right through it. People don't
yeah.
want that. What's your take on the competition? You've got obviously the big boys. You've got Amazon entering the home space in a big way.
Very big.
Obviously, you've got Wayfair. You've got the West Elms, Crate and Barrels, Pottery Barns, and then you've got the online only guys like
yep.
Floyd, etc.
Yep.
Where do you guys sit? How do you see that shaking out? What do you have to run fastest on in the next, let's say, 12 to 18 months? How are you thinking about those guys?
So we really think of it from a perspective of design. I think a lot of the D2C companies that are started, you know, with us or before us are largely solving for convenience. So it's like, how do I get my, you know, I mean, I think Amazon's largely solving for convenience right now. Not to say that, I have no doubt they will nail this. But I think it's like, how do I get a chair into my apartment in 2 days? We're not solving for convenience. We're kind of next level where I believe the real business is. It's like, I have this new place and I want it to be beautiful and reflect me. And here are my options. And this is a custom option which doesn't exist anywhere else.
That's really interesting. And, you know, you know, it's so intuitive to say where we think we're going to win is based on design. And here I am, Christiane Lemieux, you know, heavily, you know, very, very rich resume with respect to, you are a designer.
I'm a designer.
And that's how you're going to win.
Because I say this all the time. It's called interior design.
Yeah.
It's not called interior great chair.
Yeah. And the stuff looks beautiful. So it really does. That's very compelling. Very, very, very interesting.
I mean, to me, it has to be dead simple.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, that's the through line. In terms of, and we talked a little bit about at the beginning about the experiential component, retail. I know at one point, and I think no longer, maybe you can tell us why, you had a physical space, a showroom, collaboration compound.
Yes.
You're not doing that anymore. Is that something that you're interested in restarting?
Yeah.
Because I thought that was actually pretty interesting what you were doing there.
It was great. It just required somebody to manage it, like an office manager, and it's just not what we want to spend money on right now.
Okay.
I think we could easily do it all over again. I mean, there are also structural issues with the building we were in.
Okay.
Was largely the problem, that they had a quasi non-functioning elevator, and we were on the 6th floor.
That will hurt your cause.
Oh my God! It ended up being like a 6th floor walk-up. So not only did it hurt the cause, the underlying cause, also my employees wanted nothing to do with it.
Right, they were hating you.
Plus, we couldn't get our seamless deliveries ever. So
non-starter.
So that was when things are too good to be true, especially from a real estate perspective, they are too good to be true. So yeah, would we do it? I mean, but now we're in a shared work space. They take care of the printer and the front desk and the concierge and the water and everything, and it allows us to focus. I mean, it's so amazing. I sort of can't get over it, and I can't understand now why anybody would ever have a traditional office, just because we're so flexible. I mean, we literally, and Duff was laughing about this, we were like, we can't do this, is unsustainable. We broke our lease and on a Friday, and we're in our shared workspace on a Monday, and that was it.
Amazing.
Zero, and that is part of the underlying thesis
that is
of
part of
how
the
the world is. How the world has changed.
Yeah.
Is because of cloud computing. We no longer have a server room. So it's a bunch of people on a laptop, and it was so easy for us to just pick up and leave.
Which is something that you actually evangelize about, which is sort of this work home.
I evangelize about it because I also realized, especially when you're a scrappy startup, you have to go where the talent is. And so I can, I have somebody in Turkey who's working for me and people in Eastern Europe. And I have, one of my favorite textile designers is upstate and I mean, all over the place in Vermont. So it's very efficient. It works very well.
Would you come back to retail? Is that something that is on the drawing board or on the roadmap for you guys to have?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
But experiential retail, like exactly what you're talking about. So I imagine retail for us looks like a design studio.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think about the retail as a service businesses, the neighborhood goods of the world? Is that something that you guys might take advantage of?
We're in neighborhood goods.
Oh, you guys are in neighborhood goods?
Yep.
Oh,
Yep.
Okay. There you go. I thought I did all my research,
Yep,
but clearly I missed that.
We are. We're in.
And how's that working?
I think it's great so far. I mean.
And they're a forerunner company, aren't they?
They
Neighborhood
are.
goods? Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a nice relationship right there that comes out of that ecosystem.
Yeah, so it's a good cohort too. Yeah, so my co-founder just went to Texas to open the first store.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, in Plano. Yeah.
Wow. That's where the only one is, right?
That's
currently?
The only one.
Correct. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And overall, you're happy with how the inside's doing. I mean, I'm sure there are massive challenges, but sort of doing what you hoped it would do and sort of getting the trades interested and you're seeing sort of that kind of take off.
Yes. I mean, I think, the biggest challenge to any kind of startup now, especially in the consumer space, is mind share, because there's so much, we're bombarded every second with largely like a one SKU company. You'll see, whether it's a vitamin or something.
Quip,
constantly.
Yeah, Peloton.
On places like Instagram. So it's getting consumer mindshare, but this isn't what we're doing is it's not a one SKU industry. It's not a one SKU business. So really trying to be thoughtful. Our biggest challenge oftentimes is, not saying to everybody, that's not what we are. We're trying to do something. We're trying to change the way an industry thinks. We're not a one SKU company.
Do you have you've built an impressive team, which I'd be interested to hear just some thoughts on in terms of building that team. Is there anyone on that team that is like you, that is a design first person? In addition, obviously, to your entrepreneurial chops.
Yes.
As we discussed, you're really a design mindset person.
Yes. Yeah. We have a creative director who works with me. Yes. Who thinks about nothing but design, and merchandising, product assortment.
How's that collaboration going between you and that?
Oh my God.
That person?
I've known her for years.
Okay.
So she helped me research my last book. She's a design historian, so it's going very well.
Oh, that's great. Wow.
It's also it's like a matter of trust. I can let her run with some of the things that I can't focus on a day-to-day basis, which is, something I learned the hard way with my last company. You really have to, as a CEO, you have to get out of the weeds. If you're stuck in the weeds, the company doesn't go anywhere. So my job is to think, 5 years ahead and make sure that I'm constantly structuring the whole setup for success.
Which is much easier said than done.
Much easier.
You have to have a great team. I mean, you have to have a great team, and you have to also be able to let go, which is also not that easy.
Very hard, but I'm doing it this time.
Okay.
This is that's like my mantra every day. Let it go. Get out of the weeds.
I'd like to take some lessons from you on that, because I cannot do it.
You have to.
You're working on a new book.
Yes.
We've mentioned Duff's name, Duff McDonald.
Mm-hmm.
You're I guess, co-author.
That's my co-author, yeah.
Duff is a pretty well-known, prolific business writer.
Yes.
This is you would characterize it as a business book. It's a book about entrepreneurialism.
Yes, it is a business book. Yep.
Okay. And it is...
There are no pictures of furniture.
There
or furniture or interiors, for that matter.
Throw a few in. I mean, give the people what they want here.
It is not a coffee table book.
It is not a coffee. What are you guys tackling together here in terms of, obviously there's a lot of books about entrepreneurs. Is it a how-to? Is it a lessons learned? Is it
It's all of those things. And so basically the underlying premise is that because of a few sort of underlying macro things, I think the financial crisis being one of them, cloud computing being another, the advent of Amazon in a very big way being another, the way startups think and act is very different now than even 5 years ago. I mean, cloud computing that's the reason I could leave my office on a Friday and be in a co-working space on Monday. It's because everything is, financial services, for us, design, everything is in the cloud. And so it allows us to be very nimble. It also allows us to work with people in places that we never would have been able to work with before, because now there's all these platforms that allow us to do that, even if it's just Google Hangouts. So taking all of that and sort of putting it into the, I guess, mental blender, it just looks very different now than it did, especially for me, from my vantage point of having started a business, a good 12 years ago, or not even 18 years ago. And then having built it in a kind of a slow, methodical way, which is how you had to build businesses back then, because there wasn't the visibility of the internet. And then spending some time at Wayfair and understanding, just from a marketing perspective and a pure e-commerce perspective, what that looks like. And then what entrepreneurs are faced with now and how they're solving those problems. And I think largely where we are today is going to be very indicative of what the future looks like versus where I was the first time around.
So what are sort of some of the traits that you would pull out of that to be successful? I mean, you've been successful both in analog world and digitally native world. What are some of those traits that you would point to? Is it open-mindedness? Is it curiosity?
Yeah, it's open-mindedness.
Is it quick study?
Curiosity, creative problem solving, which comes up over and over and over again. It is the ability to pivot constantly. Which is a word I hate, but you end up having to do that because if and this is on a dime too, because if Instagram changes an algorithm,
cut
and
your
all of a
losses.
Sudden you've got to have like a million balls in the air, as you say, like side hustles all over the place, because what we're really doing is testing into every channel, because nobody can hand you the playbook now. Right. And as an entrepreneur, it's not like, you can read, I don't know, a book that was written 10 years ago, and it's going to help you figure out how to get your business off the ground. Now you have to write your own playbook. And that's a very different type.
Got to be willing to experiment too.
You have to be
right?
iterate. And you have to be really nimble. And you have to, like all these things that I thought were so corny, failing fast, but it's true now. I mean, you really have to.
Things are moving 20 times faster.
Yeah, you have to try. If it doesn't work, just move on. Cut and run. And I think that's a huge part of that. And you have to not be afraid of change at all. Like, you really have to embrace change. You have to go looking for it.
Yeah. And I think you've got to be very media-centric as well.
You have to be very media-centric.
And would you, I mean, in identifying the traits of a CEO is going to be successful there, what are those traits? Is that somebody who's got experience in media? Is that somebody who just from a personality perspective can put themselves out there? I mean, we actually did a podcast on direct to consumer. We were talking a lot about Quip. And, Simon Endever, the CEO, is their spokesman. He's their guy.
But,
you
have to be, because it's authenticity too.
You've got to be authentic.
You have to be authentic. You can't hand your brand off to somebody else. I mean, it used to be you could have a celebrity spokesperson. That's meaningless now. You can collaborate, and I think that's a collaborative is a very big part of it. I think there, a successful CEO also has to be has to know what they know and really assemble a great team. Have it be really collaborative. I think that, the sort of standing in the boss's office and expecting everybody to be
to sort of run around and get things done
doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
Doesn't work.
When can we expect this book to hit
October
stores?
of 2019.
Okay, so you got your work cut out for you.
Oh, yeah, we're deep into it.
Yeah, nose to the grindstone.
Yeah.
What kinds of people are you meeting and interviewing? Are you sticking with tech, or are you going just broad?
Broad.
Okay.
So, for example, yesterday we talked to a fintech company. I mean, everything from even to people who built their businesses on, QVC or HSN. So really understanding, but at its core, all of these businesses have a digital component now.
Okay.
Because they have to. I mean,
okay.
People are saying that traditional publishing is dead and that it's all shifting. Everything is shifting to digital platforms. They just are. So even the most traditional businesses, the ones that are going to succeed, are digitally savvy.
Sounds really interesting. I mean, good luck with that. That's a huge project to take on, but worthy, and I'm sure you're learning as you go.
I mean,
yeah, that's actually kind of a nice way to cheat.
I had no idea, but it's a super secret way to cheat.
Yeah.
Because I'm getting, every single.
I'm cheating now. I mean, I do this. It's the same idea.
Yeah.
The amount that I absorb talking to, the people that come on, it's a similar idea. I mean, you get that sort of side hustle benefit.
Yep.
Yeah, that's amazing. What do you think would be next for you? I mean, can you imagine? I mean, 5 years out, 10 years out, writing, teaching. More businesses.
I think. I wish I could tell you about the meeting I had before this one.
Okay.
I would say that I think investing.
Okay.
Would be very interesting.
Yeah, sure.
Setting up now that I know what I know.
Mm-hmm.
I think teaching. I think writing. I think all of these. I mean, all of it. It's so. Because I think all of this is like foundational, builds on top of itself. Yes. And so, if you're willing to be very open-minded and experiment and pivot and put yourself out there and succeed and fail mostly, you gain a lot of experience.
Have you done any investing in early stage to date? You have?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How's it going?
So far, great
bets.
Good? Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
All right, great.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I would only see, for me, I would invest in what I understand. And so the consumer experience and, especially the reason I think that Kirsten has been so successful is that, a lot of this is purchased by women. So, whether it's fashion or beauty or a lot of the digital
home,
native,
I guess, to some extent.
Absolutely.
Sure, yeah.
So, coming from that perspective, I think because you are the customer, and once you're the customer, and then you understand like the business fundamentals, it gets a lot easier to make smart bets.
Do you ever see yourself moving back to Canada, or are you a lifer here in New York, do you think?
I don't know that I'll move back to Canada, but I could see myself going to Europe for a while.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Would you move back to Canada? I mean,
I would. Particularly what's going on here now these days. That might drive me back there sooner than I would have thought. But it's of course the grass is always greener. But things just seem so much more relaxed up there whenever I'm up there.
They are. I just want to be everywhere.
Less conflict.
Yeah. I just want to be everywhere, though.
Yeah.
Because my parents live in Paris part of the year, and that's kind of great. And it's just...
Well, of course, and who you are and what you do. That's such a perfect place, too.
I have to go where the inspiration is. I think it's also... I believe that's how our kids are going to experience the world, too. Because if you think about it, part of the reason for the inside is because... people are moving much more. Apparently the stat is people will move 7 times in the first 15 years of their post-college career. It may be New York, it may be Beijing, it may be Dubai. So it's not, it's a much more global experience. We heard some crazy stat that people have 29 jobs in their life, our kids. A lot of that is like side hustles because they may, you are a lawyer and a podcast host, and for all I know, you could be an eBay seller and have an incredibly influential Instagram account. That you can have. I mean, I have 4 jobs currently. I'm writing 2 books. I run a startup, and I have a legacy licensing business.
That is the new way.
It is the new way.
Yeah.
And also, we talk about, this is something that's near and dear to Duff's heart, but the sort of gig economy. I mean, I don't know, we had some stat by 2023 that 50% of jobs are going to be self-created. So that's half the population is an entrepreneur.
Yeah, it is sort of incredible to think how different it is today than it was 20 years ago, let's say.
Because
you pretty much had a job, that was it. You didn't think about all these other things.
Nope.
You weren't thinking about your social media. You weren't thinking about doing media. You weren't thinking about really pretty much anything else other than what was right in front of you and your family.
Right.
That was it.
So you get a job, you buy a house, you stay there, and you retire. I mean, that's why...
Shop at Bloomingdale's and...
Exactly. So think about our world. You used to buy your home, decorate it once, and now that's why it's such an interesting category, and that's why all these big players are going after it. It's because you may move 5 times, and you're going to probably want to redecorate your space every time.
Yeah, and price point's got to be key there too.
Price point is key.
Well, listen, on that note, Christiane, I want to thank you. This has been fantastic. Hope you'll come back and
I will come back.
Give us an update on how the inside's doing and maybe when the book comes out.
When the book comes out, you'll have to have
Duff we'll have
and
you and Duff on to talk about that.
We'll talk about, there's some pretty interesting key learnings there.
Yes, sounds great. Okay, good.
Thanks.
Well, thanks, Christiane.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, likewise.
That's a wrap on this episode of The Medium Rules with Alan Baldachin. For more information, go to our website at www.hballp.com. And you can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And don't forget to rate us on Apple Podcasts.